out in California, West Hollywood City Council has voted to pass a minimum wage hike, boosting minimum wage for some workers up to $17.64 an hour. And like with all of these stories, here at Daggerfinn, we like to think about all the implications. So we look at what this one kind of change means from both sides of the equation for the employer and for the employee, and kind of what we need to think about when you think about these kind of hikes. So let's look at the employer side first and think about all the different implications that a wage hike like this presents. And so the rollout is going to be interesting. It's going to be rolled out in a couple different phases. And so West Hollywood has said that, okay, the goal is to introduce $17.64 an hour in January, and then roll it out to hotels, and then large businesses, and then small businesses, with small businesses being those under 49 workers, so 49 workers and under. And kind of elongate it out, the goal is to get to $18.77 an hour by July of 2023 when you key in for the consumer price index. So it's quite a significant shift, getting up to that level of hourly wage for a lot of these businesses. If you imagine a restaurant or certain other small businesses that work on very thin margins, what does this mean, right? The story, at least here in the LA Times, is it interviews a few different business owners who, again, with any of these kinds of moves, half of the people are excited about it, which is fine. It's a good thing to be raising the level of income for everybody. But on the other side, you've got business owners who this is stressful, right? Like when you're already operating on thin margins, to bump up minimum wage, depending on what they were offering before, can really put a strain on cash flow and on operating margins. So from an employer brand standpoint, the guidance here is, we've got to use this time as business owners and as companies to figure out how to get a little bit more efficient. Because you'd like to think, and this is one of those things that you'd like to assume happens, but really doesn't, because there are market forces at play. But you'd like to think with a higher minimum wage that companies then could attract a higher level of talent, so to speak, and so companies can get more efficient, and then the margins stay where they are despite the minimum wage getting higher. But that's not typically the case. So businesses are going to have to look at different ways to attract the kind of talent that allows them to operate what used to take maybe 2 people with 1.5 people, so to speak, and that's going to require some thinking around hiring process and the brand that these businesses portray out to the marketplace on the talent side. So there are implications or ramifications to a move like this, raising minimum wage, so high, that businesses are going to have to respond to. And it'll be interesting to see this little area, when you look at the grand scheme of things, the U.S. and then the world, West Hollywood, how this serves as a litmus test for hiking wage to this point, for minimum wage, and to see how businesses respond. Do we see a decrease in the number of small business operating by 2023, 2024 as a result of this, or are there efficiencies that come into place due to the market forces? On the employee side, the worker side, this is of course great news for a large swath of workers that work at that minimum wage level. The article speaks to a few different people, and some call this a life-changing kind of amount of money, which is great on the surface. I think, for individuals who are struggling, raising wages like this is great. But there's also, especially right now, an inflationary kind of factor that's happening, an inflation factor that needs to be taken into account. So fantastic, get it up to 1764, get it up to 1877 by 2023, but hopefully we've solved how inflation is going to chip away at those gains, so that this is actually a sustainable amount of money, or a sustainable increase for workers going forward. But generally, I think wage hikes are great for workers, and people should go and make as much money as they possibly can, and this is an excellent thing. So you've got two very interesting forces, or pulls and pulls and pushes that are happening here. Does this 1764 minimum wage put market forces across the entire state of California, perhaps? And then, nationally, in that if people flock to West Hollywood to grab these kind of wages, does that put pressure on other businesses in other counties and other districts to raise their wages? That's going to be an interesting thing to look at from the employee's perspective. So there's a lot going on, and it's interesting to think about. But like all of these kinds of stories, that when we're looking through the lens of employer brand, we're looking through the lens of organizational structure and talent brands and recruitment. It's important to think about all the different factors that are at play here. So, just as a quick recap, 1764 an hour wage hike in West Hollywood. What does that mean with inflation? What does that mean for the market forces in terms of what's going to happen to wages across California? And then on the employer side, this is going to be an opportunity to try and develop efficiencies or try and find ways to be able to continue operating at some level of margin. Plus, is this a chance to invest in employer brand or invest in the recruitment side so that you can attract a level of worker that is going to enable you to do the work of one of two people with 1.5 individuals, so to speak. So cool story, interesting to think about. And if you like this video, if you like this episode, please consider hitting subscribe just so that you can get all these updates as they come out.